All right, programming note that you all know. After you're done with me, you will hear from Ambassador Barbara Woodward, the permanent representative of the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland to these United Nations. And of course, she'll be here in her capacity as president of the Security Council of the United Nations for the month of November. After that, there'll be a briefing by Richard Bennett, the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Afghanistan. Tomorrow, Saturday, we will observe the International Day to End Impunity for crimes against journalists, those who get killed simply for doing their important job in reporting to the public and pursuing the truth. In his message for the day, the Secretary General underscores that a free press is fundamental to human rights, to democracy, and to the rule of law. As you well know, recent years have seen an alarming rate of fatalities in conflict zones, particularly in Gaza, which has seen the highest number of killings of journalists and media workers in a war in decades. According to a new report by the UN Educational and Scientific Organization, 85% of all killings recorded by UNESCO since 2006 are considered unresolved. And today, the Secretary General delivered a message to the UN International Media Seminar on Peace in the Middle East, which is going on in Geneva. In his message, he warned that journalists in Gaza have been killed at a level unseen by any conflict in modern times. The ongoing ban preventing international journalists from Gaza suffocates the truth even further, he said. At the same time, he added, several journalists have also been killed or injured covering key stories impacting the occupied West Bank. This is unacceptable, he said. The voice of journalists must be protected and press freedom must be safeguarded. Just a short while ago, the UN's Interagency Standing Committee, which brings together leaders of 15 UN humanitarian agencies and also large international NGOs, humanitarian NGOs, issued a joint statement describing the situation unfolding in North Gaza as apocalyptic. The group says that hospitals have been almost entirely cut off from supplies and have come under attack, killing patients, destroying vital equipment, disrupting life-saving services. Health workers and patients have been taken into custody. Fighting has also been reportedly taken place inside hospitals. The committee has received reports of civilians being targeted while trying to seek safety and of men and boys being arrested and taken to unknown locations and detention. The IASC also recalled that the Israeli parliament adopted legislation recently that would ban UNRWA and revoke its privileges and immunities. If implemented, the committee warns such measures would be a catastrophe for the humanitarian response in Gaza, diametrically opposed to the UN Charter, with potentially dire impacts on the human rights of millions of Palestinians who rely on UNRWA for assistance, and in violations of Israel's obligations under international law. There is no alternative to UNRWA, the group says. The full statement is online. And turning to the situation on the ground in Gaza, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs warns that in North Gaza Governorate, virtually all incoming supplies and humanitarian services have ceased. This is due to the ongoing siege imposed by Israeli security forces, as well as insecurity, limited supplies, and the displacement of aid workers. Some 100,000 people recently displaced from North Gaza are sheltering in schools, buildings, and makeshift sites in Gaza City, while about 75,000 people are estimated to remain in North Gaza Governorate. With no electricity or fuel allowed since October 1st, only 2 of 8 water wells in Jabalia refugee camp remain functional, both unfortunately just partially. As of yesterday, no bakeries or public kitchens are operational. Only 2 of 20 health service points and 2 hospitals remain operational, all partially, and rescue operations have come to a complete halt. South of Wadi Gaza, OCHA is closely monitoring reports of ongoing intense hostilities in the northern Nusrat area in Deir al-Balah Governorate, with a high number of casualties admitted to Al-Awada Hospital. This area has been largely inaccessible for months, with the latest denial of access for OCHA team occurring earlier this week. However, our teams remain deployed nearby, observing displacement southward and receiving reports of families trapped in the area, unable to leave amidst ongoing military operations. Meanwhile, OCHA reports that the UN and our partners are working to support displaced Palestinians ahead of the rainy season. Yesterday in Deir el-Bala, OCHA participated in an assessment of 2 displacement sites in the Masha Allah area, where nearly 8,000 people have sought shelter. The team says that it is urgent that the makeshift shelters at these sites can be repaired and improved to protect people from excess water. Meanwhile, we also have an update for you on the polio vaccination campaign, which is set to resume tomorrow in northern Gaza. The vaccines will be delivered by 216 teams across about 100 fixed sites, nearly 24 of which were added to ensure increased availability of vaccination in areas where recently displaced people are seeking shelter. Our colleagues from UNICEF and the World Food Programme say humanitarian pause necessary to conduct this extremely important campaign has been assured, but the area of pause has been substantially reduced compared to the first round of vaccination that took place in the north back in September. It is now limited to Gaza City. This means that some 15,000 children under the age of 10 in parts of North Gaza, including Jabalia, Bet Laia, and Beit Hanun, remain inaccessible and could be missed during the campaign, which compromises its overall effectiveness. As a reminder, in order to interrupt transmission of the polio virus, at least 90% of all children in every community and neighborhood must be vaccinated. And moving north to Lebanon today, General Aroldo Lazzaro, as you know, the force commander for UNIFIL, met with Lebanese officials that included the Speaker of the Parliament, Nabi Berri, Prime Minister Najib Mikati, the Foreign Minister, Abdullah Abu Habib, and the commander of the Lebanese Armed Forces, General Joseph Aoun. They discussed the ongoing conflict and its serious implications on civilians, especially in areas where peacekeepers operate. General Lazzaro emphasized that the urgent need to resolve issues at the negotiating table, a political and a diplomatic solution with a full implementation, recommitment to Resolution 1701 is the only way to return to a cessation of hostilities. He also welcomed the assurances given to him by all interlocutors in this regard. Meanwhile, on the ground, one of our peacekeeping patrols was blocked by the IDF near Hula in Sector East. The peacekeepers remain in position, and we strongly remind all actors of their obligations to ensure that the UN peacekeepers have unrestricted freedom of movement in its area of operations. On the ground, IDF airstrikes continue across Lebanon, with the first strikes in Beirut's southern suburbs in several days, while strikes continued in Baalbek. Lebanese authorities are reporting at least 13 fatalities, including children, from the Israeli strikes today. The terrible impact on civilians is, of course, a grave concern to us. In addition, we note the serious concern about reports of at least 7 civilians killed from Hezbollah strikes into northern Israel over the last 24 hours. We condemn the rising toll on civilians and civilian infrastructure and the loss of civilian life on both sides of the blue line. We also note the statement from the special coordinator from Lebanon that recent evacuation orders for the cities of Baalbek and Tyre forced tens of thousands of Lebanese to flee en masse, worsening an already catastrophic displacement situation. She also said that Lebanon's ancient cultural sites are also in danger. The special coordinator, Janine Hennis-Plaschert, underscored that Lebanon's cultural heritage must not be yet another casualty of this devastating conflict. We remind all parties that they must follow international law and protect civilians and civilian infrastructure. And also, just on Lebanon, despite the ongoing hostilities, our humanitarian partners are continuing their response. 2 humanitarian convoys delivered emergency supplies to Tyre, and that included water, blanket, ready-to-meal eats, and other items. The teams also conducted an emergency needs assessment of the population that has been displaced and that is remaining in the town. So far, since the recent escalation, A total of 15 convoys have been successfully organized to reach areas in Tyre, in Hasbaya, and Marjioun, as well as Baalbek. Our colleagues from the International Organization for Migration have recorded more than 842,000 people being displaced in Lebanon since October 2023. For its part, the UN Refugee Agency reports that since September 23rd of this year, 469,000 men, women, and children have fled from Lebanon into Syria. That's based on estimates given to us by the Syrian Arab Red Crescent. The conflict continues to impact civilian infrastructure. For example, since October 8th of last year, at least 29 water facilities have been damaged, impacting water supply to more than 360,000 people, primarily in southern Lebanon. That's what UNICEF is telling us. Moving on to Pakistan, I can tell you that the Secretary General strongly condemns the attack that took place today in Balochistan's province, which reportedly led to the deaths of at least 7 people, including 5 school children, and injured 23 others. The Secretary General stresses that attacks against civilians, healthcare facilities, and healthcare workers are unacceptable. He extends his deepest condolences to the families and calls on the government of Pakistan to conduct an investigation and ensure that those responsible are brought to justice and held accountable. And on Bolivia, I wanted to tell you that the Secretary General is following closely and with concern the escalating tensions in that country. He urges all parties to exercise restraint and refrain from any acts of violence. The Secretary General calls on all political actors to resolve their differences by peaceful means and in full respect of human rights. I also have a statement on the situation in Sudan. The Secretary General strongly condemns the recent attack by the Rapid Support Forces in Al Jazeera state amidst escalating violence across the country. The Secretary General is appalled by large numbers of civilians being killed, being detained, or being displaced, as well as acts of sexual violence against women and girls, the looting of homes and the looting of markets and the burning of farms. Such acts may constitute serious violations of international humanitarian law and human rights law. Perpetrators of such serious violations must be held to account. The Secretary General notes with alarm that the humanitarian situation in Sudan continues to worsen, with hunger, with disease continuing to spread, and half of the population of Sudan in need of aid. He demands that all parties to the conflict facilitate the safe, the rapid, and the unimpeded humanitarian access to all civilians in need in Sudan through all necessary routes in line with their obligations under international humanitarian law. The Secretary General renews his call for a ceasefire to spare the Sudanese civilians for any further suffering. The personal envoy of the Secretary General, Ramtan Lamamra, will continue to engage with the parties and all relevant stakeholders to de-escalate the conflict and to explore the modalities to strengthen the protection of civilians. And continue on Sudan, on the humanitarian part, the International Organization for Migration now reports more than 135,000 people have been displaced from locations across Al Jazeera state between October 20th and 30th. That's 2 days ago. More than half have fled to Gadaref state, with nearly a third seeking shelter in Kassala state. Our colleagues from OCHA remain deeply concerned about the plight of civilians trapped in the ongoing fighting in Al Jazeera state, as well as the safety of those who are forced to flee. We and our humanitarian partners, especially local organizations and volunteers, are supporting thousands of these new arrivals with urgent assistance, as well as critical services such as family tracing, family reunification services, mental health, and psychosocial support. As we have repeatedly said, civilians must be protected whether they move or they stay, and whether they may be able to receive the humanitarian assistance they need. Turning to South Sudan, the horrific humanitarian situation there, the World Food Program is urgently appealing to donors to provide nearly early funding for next year's operations in the country. The food agency needs $404 million so it can pre-position food to prevent operational costs and hunger through 2025. And a note on a change in our posture in Somalia. After more than 10 years, the UN assistance mission in Somalia ceased operations yesterday and was succeeded by the UN Transitional Assistance Mission for Somalia, which means we have a new acronym, UNTMIS. Okay, that is as of today, and of course the change is pursuant to Security Council Resolution 2753. Over the past decade, UNSOM had made significant contributions to Somali efforts to advance state-building priorities in Somalia. The establishment of the new mission reflects the progress in the country and is in line with the request of the federal government of Somalia for a 2-year period of transition of UNSOM's functions to national institutions, the UN country team, and other stakeholders by October of 2026. Under the new mandate, the new UN mission will commence the transition process while also continuing to provide assistance to Somalia as they implement national priorities. The UN remains committed to continuing supporting the government and people of Somalia throughout the transition and beyond. Almost done. 2 new resident coordinators. The Secretary General has appointed Susan Ngongi Namondo of Cameroon as the new UN resident coordinator in Tanzania. She starts today, now that the government has cleared her appointment. She brings over 25 years of experience in development work, including 19 years leading development professionals in various areas. She was previously resident coordinator in Uganda and resident humanitarian coordinator in Eritrea. We congratulate her. Also, the Secretary General appointed Leonard Zulu of Zimbabwe as the new resident coordinator in Uganda. He also started today, now that he has the government's approval. He brings more than 20 years of experience in humanitarian action, development, peace building, human rights, protection of refugees and asylum seekers. Previous to that, he worked for UNHCR in Afghanistan and many other countries. We congratulate him. Monday, just pencil in, we're trying to get for you Georgios Petropoulos, the head of OCHA's office in Gaza, to brief you. If we don't succeed for Monday, it'll be later in the week. And then at 1:30 on Monday, Nicolas Levra, the special rapporteur of minority issues, will be here to answer your questions, which I will now do. Edie.
Thank you, Steph. I just want to make sure that on Sudan, all of those violations that you listed were from the RSF.
I think we have seen, yes, we have seen in Al Jazeera violations from the RSF, but we have seen many other groups also potentially violate international law.
But not in
Al Jazeera, I will leave it at that. Yeah.
Okay. And also on Sudan, the last effort to get the RSF and the government together was in Geneva, I believe, and that was some months ago. What efforts is the UN making to actually try and get both sides to sit down at a negotiating table? Because in Geneva, only one side really showed up.
I mean, Mr. Lamamra is continuing his efforts, continuing his contacts, and obviously, when I think there is a critical mass of progress, we may be able to move forward.
And just on what you said about UNIFIL, are there any more details on why this patrol was blocked?
No. Deji.
Yes, on the polio campaign, I was reading 2 press releases, one from UNRWA and one from COGAT. It's different. It's a little bit different, but from UNRWA, they said they are preparing for their people to get into northern Gaza. Well, first, you just mentioned there would be like more than 200 teams to deliver the vaccine. Will those people from outside northern Gaza, or part of them would be just there, helping the delivery of
It's a good question. I think it's a combination of both.
Okay, so if UNRWA released this press release, does that mean that those people from UNRWA also get cleared to enter northern Gaza by COGAT?
I mean, whatever UNRWA said. I'm not, I have
Okay.
no doubt of the
Right.
veracity of what my colleagues are saying. So I'm not here to interpret.
Okay,
what-
so from the COGAT press release, they only mentioned WHO and UNICEF. They didn't mention anything about UNRWA. Does that still, is this an example that means that UNRWA is still irreplaceable, even though the Israeli parliament has already deemed it with a very, to strip
the situation,
immunity?
the situation of UNRWA's critical role, whether in Gaza, whether in the West Bank, and remind you, not just on humanitarian, but on providing all sorts of social services, education, health, psychosocial, and many others. That hasn't changed. The fact that they weren't mentioned in a tweet doesn't change the situation.
One last thing. You just mentioned that this polio campaign now in northern Gaza would only be conducted in Gaza City, not some other places. But will the UN and its agencies request extra, let's say, extra time for the other locations like Jabalia?
Look, we have this announcement from our colleagues who are running the campaign. I'm sure they have pushed the envelope with all parties involved as much as they can. This is what has been agreed to, and they will move forward. But obviously, not as effective as if we'd had more areas.
Thank you.
Joseph Klein, Canada Free Press.
Thank you. To your knowledge, have any representatives from UN agencies such as the World Food Program, World Health Organization, UNICEF, UNESCO, etc., been barred from entry into any part of Gaza by Israel?
I'm not aware of any public statement to that effect. Whether or not certain individuals from certain agencies have not gotten the permits or the right to, I can't speak to.
Is that something you can check on? Because the reason I'm asking is, as you know, the law passed by Israel's Knesset only applies to UNRWA. As far as I know, it doesn't mention barring any
That's
other
correct.
UN organization. And Israel has its reasons, whether you agree with them or not, that evidence of some of UNRWA.
I mean, it would come as no surprise that we don't. But
Well,
what is the question,
Let me just
Joe?
finish my sentence.
What is the question? Sorry.
Evidence that some UNRWA personnel, even admitted by UNRWA, have participated in terrorist attacks.
What is
UNRWA
the
facilities.
Joe? What is the question?
I'm trying to set it
I know.
up.
I believe the set.
UNRWA facilities used
But
by
just
Hamas,
I,
etc.
we all
Okay.
just pitch.
The question. The question is, when you say that what Israel has done violates international law, the Knesset legislation only focuses on this one organization, not other UN organizations whose representatives have not been blocked, as far as you know, from accessing Gaza.
We're talking about obligations that Israel has under international law regarding privileges and immunities, regarding agreements already signed. And national law cannot override that, not just in Israel, but anywhere. Gabby.
Thank you, Steph. As you know, Special Rapporteur Francisca Albanese is in New York. She was invited to speak later today at the New School. There's a group that's going to protest her presence there, and in their press release announcing to the media that they were going to protest her, they said that they are going to present her today with, in their words, a beeper. At minimum, this is intimidation. At more, it could be perceived as perhaps a direct threat against a UN Special Rapporteur. Is the Secretary General aware of this, and what is his reaction?
Look, I'm aware of it from what you've told me. I mean, I'm not going to get into the details of what every group says. We believe in the right of freedom of expression and demonstration peacefully, and that we stand against any threats of violence.
Do you think that the Secretary General should ask DSS to at least inform local law enforcement about a possible threat against a
I mean,
special rapid
we
tour?
don't discuss security issues.
If I can follow up on one more, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Thanks, Steph. On the polio vaccine in northern Gaza, it's limited to Gaza City. However, Beit Hanun is only 11 kilometers north of Gaza City. I guess my question is, people are going to wonder, how is it that the UN can get 216 teams into Gaza City in the north, but everywhere else, nothing, no aid is getting to anybody else just less than 12 kilometers away? Has the UN, or would the UN consider pressuring Israel to say, if you're allowing polio vaccines in, we also want aid in as well?
I think as I kind of tried to explain it to Deji, our colleagues from UNRWA, from UNICEF, from WHO are all spearheading this, are negotiating with all the parties to get these havens, right, small islands of peace where they can deliver these vital vaccines. Obviously, and I'm not going to second guess them from this podium, they have done as much as they can with everyone involved, and this is what they've secured. Is it great? Is it perfect? Absolutely not. The point is, when you're vaccinating against polio, everyone should cooperate. Everyone should facilitate it. I mean, and you know, we're on the other side of the world. Polio vaccinators were attacked in Pakistan. I mean, the children were killed. The attacks against people who are trying to deliver the most basic vaccine is just heinous. And the facilitation of vaccination in Gaza should be facilitated by all. But unfortunately, this is the result that we have. Okay. You, and then Margaret, and then Pam.
Thank you, Steve. I have follow-up question about polio campaign. So, why is the region limited to the campaign? Israel authority denied it, and one more. So, do you think UN can get more than 90%?
Listen, I think, as I said, my colleagues who are dealing with this, who are negotiating with the Israelis, and I assume negotiating with Hamas and other armed groups, because it is about all of the parties who are fighting and ensuring that there are safe spaces for the vaccination. This is the best that they've been able to get. And I'm sure it's not through lack of extensive trying, extensive efforts, right? Extensive passion for what they do. But this is where we are. And I think, you know, whether they'll get to 90%, I think we'll have to assess that afterwards. Margaret.
Also on polio. So you've just finished reading us this interagency statement saying northern Gaza is apocalyptic. It sounds very dangerous for the humanitarians to be there in the first place. So who took the decision to restart the campaign? Was it each individual agency, or did it go up the food chain to the Secretary General?
No, they worked. The humanitarian agencies worked on this together. But the Secretary General, I think, is extremely proud of the work that they're doing. Gaza is not really a safe space for humanitarian workers, yet they're going ahead with the assurances they've received. We hope all sides will respect the assurances given, and we hope it'll be as successful as possible.
And since it's only in Gaza City, what's the expectation for families that are outside of Gaza City to get there safely?
Very challenging, but I think we'll need to have an update after the weekend. Pam, and then Michelle, and then Ibtisam.
Thanks, Steph. Yeah, another follow-up on the polio vaccination campaign. You mentioned, and just for clarification, you mentioned a shortened ceasefire or pause to have that happen, didn't you?
I mean, one of us needs to pay attention to what I say. Yes, I mentioned. Yes, okay. What's the
Yes.
question?
So is that confirmed?
What do you mean?
that there's going to be?
I mean,
both sides have
these
agreed
are
to it? All
assurance.
sides?
These are assurances given, right? I mean, these are assurances given. We
And
have
how
to go.
long is the pause or ceasefire?
It'll be as you know. Usually these things have been a few hours. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I
Okay.
just was,
What?
thank you. I was just trying to clarify.
Yes, Michelle.
Will it be similar to what happened last time? It's pause of like 8 hours
I mean,
for
it's
2 or 3 days?
It's limited in time. Yes.
Okay.
But again, I think afterwards we'll have better detail as to what actually happened.
But you know we want to know before.
I know you do, Michelle.
Anyway, I have a question on North Korea.
Oh.
So obviously they launched their ICBM, and the North Korean foreign minister has said today that North Korea needs to strengthen its nuclear weapons and improve its readiness for a retaliatory nuclear strike. The South Koreans have warned that they could be imminently about to conduct a nuclear test. What would be the Secretary General's message to North Korea at this time on the possibility of another nuclear test?
I think we would not want to see another new nuclear test. We want to see step back, moving back towards negotiations, towards a diplomatic solution. These are issues that Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo is currently in Japan on a previously scheduled trip. She will be going to the Republic of Korea next week. I'm sure these are issues that will be part of her discussions.
And what would be the Secretary General's message to the Security Council, which is clearly divided on this issue?
Unity. Ibtisam.
Thank you, Steph. I want to follow up on your answer regarding banning UNRWA and other. Just to clarify, aren't your staff, from other organizations, not getting visas? For example, OCHA, 2 heads didn't get their visas renewed. Human Rights Council, UN.
No,
Human Rights Council.
completely.
there
I think
is-
I don't mean to interrupt. I'm probably over-caffeinated. The way I heard Joe's question was specifically about Gaza, right? But it is clear that there have been visa denials for a whole sorts of people throughout the UN system.
And I have another question on, in The Guardian, they reported that the UN Secretary General has warned Israel could carry out an ethnic cleansing of Gaza if the international community doesn't move and prevent it. My question here is, a lot of people, including special rapporteurs in this organization and people also from outside this organization who work on this field, said that ethnic cleansing is actually already happening in Gaza, given the fact that you have now more than 43,000 people who are being killed, etc. So isn't it a little bit too late and too not go doesn't reflect what's actually happening in the ground?
I mean, I think different people in this system, different entities have different mandates and different opinions. The Secretary General has his, and some special rapporteurs and others have theirs. Okay, thank you all. We will get the President of the Security Council for you. See you Monday. No, you too.